We're starting the Ezra Hashem siman kuf samach ches in vayoel moshe, and we're up to the shaila of what the Gemara in Shabbos kuf lam ches means when it says the Torah will be forgotten, and then Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says the Torah will not be forgotten, but rather they won't find halacha brura b'makom echad. So, just in the last siman, just to recap, he explained what halacha brura b'makom echad means. It means that we won't have. About there was machlokes for hundreds of years. That's not new. What's new is that we won't have a way to paskin in the machlokes because we won't be able to follow the majority, because when not everybody's influenced by the Torah. Some people are influenced by outside sources, so you can't necessarily know who is who and who's purely talking divrei Torah from Hashem, and therefore you don't know who to follow. And even the klal of Achri Rabbim, even the klal of Achri Rabbim Latois won't help you. So now going back to answer up the question that he started with in I think Kuf Sam Daled and Hey, which was that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai brings a pasuk ki loisi shachach mi pi zaroi. The Torah will not be forgotten. And the Gemara never explained what the other shittas do with that pasuk. So now he's going to answer that. According to what we said, we can say now that really this machlokes Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and the Tanna Kama is not a machlokes. They're both saying different sides of the question, but they're not arguing. That the introduction to the Gemara that's Hanidfas Soif Masechta Brachos, that's printed at the end of Masechta Brachos, that's printed the different rules for learning. It says Bekitzer Klali Talmud. It's brought in the abbreviated version of the rules of the Talmud. Sham b'shem Haran, in the name of the Ran, shekasher nire amoraim, that when we see different amoraim, it looks like they're arguing, but shesoivel ma'amoram loimer she'enam cholkim, that it's possible to learn into the words a pshat that will say that they're not arguing, ava pi shehu dachuk, even though it's a difficult pshat, shehu dachuk tzas, a little bit difficult, ein lanu loimer shecholkim, we still want to go with that pshat. We want to say that there's no machlokes, because better not to have machlokes. The klal gadohu, it's a very big rule that apushe plukta loy mafshinan. We don't try to make as much machlokes as we can. Adrab, we try to minimize the amount of machlokes.
But we find like some chacham, like Abai and Rav and Shmuel, you find them arguing constantly.
Yeah, well, when they're arguing. But if you have one Tana here and one Tana on a different masechta somewhere, and they say two different things that look like they're arguing, but if we can make them
say lo pligi.
Right. Right. So Oid Hevi, it brings there also another klal, the afsha al pi haroiv, even though generally speaking, when it says, like I said here, it says Reb Shimon Oimer. Reb Shimon says, not Omer Reb Shimon, like a new member, but Reb Shimon Oimer, like he's coming to argue. So usually taka means that he's arguing, but mikomakum matzinu lefa'amim. We sometimes find she'omer b'lashon ploini omer, that it says the name first and then it says omer for who loy chayil, and he's not arguing. So even though over here Reb Shimon said Reb Shimon omer, it doesn't mean that he's arguing. V'ayin b'chedushay Rashba Masechta Sukkah daf chav hey she'amru sham b'gemara, that the Rashba says on the Gemara in Sukkah, Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, Rabbi Yitzchak said, it doesn't say Amar Rabbi Yitzchak like a new statement. It says Rabbi Yitzchak Amar. Still the Rashba says that they're not arguing. The Kulu Tanai Hachi Sabri. All the Tanaim hold like what Rabbi Yitzchak says. Rabbi Yitzchak Kudim Mefarishlu, he's just explaining them. And the same thing applies in many places. So here also we can say Rabbi Shimon's not arguing. It's just a separate member that was said separately, and later on, when they were Masadr the Shas, they put it in there. Okay? The Hinei Bekan. Now here in our sugya between Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and the Rabbanan, Ein Shum Doichet Klal. It's not even a difficult thing to explain it as being not a machlokes. Im name a delay pligi. If we say it's not a machlokes, Ela Adrabah Miyushavim Kol Akushas. Fakert, it answers up all the questions that we've been asking. Shekosavti. The questions that I asked.
So Reb Shimon is not being chayil on Rav. He's just proving the point. What he's saying.
He's just saying the other side of the question. And you'll keep.
Because the thing is that Rebbe came before Rav. Because Rebbe Shimon, lived before Rav.
It's not Rav. It's the Tanna Kama. It's the Tanaim of the Brisa.
No.
And then Rav is also mentioned there, but Rav is before the Brisa. Rav says a different pasuk of half of a fella. Okay, so
because Rav still was able to argue with her since she was one of the earliest Amoraim.
So Adrabam Yushav and Kol HaKusha Shekasavti B'Ravcha Imein Bo Zeshum Plugged. If we say there's no machlokes, then we can answer all the questions. Why? Dehine Bekan Omer Reb Shimon Bar Yochai Lashon Chas V'Shalom Shetishtakach Torah Miyisrael. Here in the Gemara and Shabbos, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says that Chas V'Shalom, heaven forbid, the Torah should be forgotten. Uva Sifri Hu B'Lashon Acher. Mashenkin by this in the Sifri, part of the Parshas Ekev, the end of Parshas Ekev, there Piskim Mem Ches. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai Omer, Asida Torah Shedishtachach Miyisrael. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai he is the man the Omer that says Torah is going to be forgotten. So it's mamish the opposite of the Gemara. V'haloi kvar nemar, continues the Sifri, v'haloi kvar nemar, it says Ki lo yisachim mipizar. Right? What about the pasuk that it won't be forgotten? Ela ish ploni oyser v'ish ploni matir. It just means that there'll be a machlokes between those who permit, those who forbid. V'lo yimsu davar bar, we won't find a clear answer. We see from this, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai atzmai Omar, Oisei Alashon Sheb'Braisa. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai himself was the Tanakama of this Braisa, Asida Torah Shetishtakach Miyisrael. Here, so it's really not a machlokes, it's the same man the Omar. Hagam sheyesh mefarshim shehu b'lashon v'tmiyah. There are mefarshim on the Sifri who try to get out of this by saying, no, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is not saying the Torah will be forgotten, but rather he's saying that will it be forgotten? You have to learn. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai Omer, I see the Torah shetishachach Yisrael. Is it possible the Torah will be forgotten? Now these mefarshim, we say that it's bitmiyah. They're the Zera Avram on the Sifri and the Emek HaNetziv on the Sifri.
Yeah.
Anyway, Hagam sheyesh mefarshim shu b'lashon bitmiyah. Some get out of it by saying the Sifri just meant as a question, not as a statement. They're trying to answer this up because they have a problem that it's a contradiction to the Gemara. Then in my humble opinion, it's more mistaber to say that the Sifri means exactly as it says. Reb Shimon calls this thing shelo yimtzu halacha brura. He calls the fact that they won't find a psak halacha, shichas haTorah. He calls that forgetting Torah. Why? The kivin shelo yuchlu leida das Torah. Since they won't be able to know das Torah, havizeh shichas haTorah. That's called forgetting. Umasha amar ki lo yisishach mipizaro yispar lahalan. I'm going to explain in a minute what he means by it won't be forgotten. V'hinei yoyster mizehu b'zoyer chadash b'medrash hanelam daf yud gimel and aleph. The Zohar says like this, Be'oisa Shah Bacha Rabbi Akiva. And he's going to show that there are Tanoim besides Reb Shimon and maybe Reb Shimon himself who says the Torah will be forgotten, and this is called forgetting. Take a look. Be'oisa Shah Bacha Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva cried and he said to his Rebbe Rebbe Lezer, so he cried in front of his Rebbe Lezer. So Amar Le, Rebbe Lezer said to Rabbi Akiva, Al-ma kabachis, why are you crying? Amar Loi, Rabbi Akiva said back to Rebbe Lezer, Oy lador she'iyu yisoimim mimecha. Woe to the generation that will be yisoimim from you. It sounds like Rebbe Lezer was about to be nifter now, and Rabbi Akiva was the one sitting with him, talking with him as he was nifter, and he said to him, the generation is going to be orphaned of you when you're nifter. So Amar Lo, Rabbi Lezer said back to him, Al toimar kach, don't say that. Elavai lador she'iyu yisoimim b'li av. Woe to the generation that will be orphans without a father, b'li chacham moira, without any chacham that paskins, v'loi talmud hoiga, not a talmud that's able to understand. V'yamim yavoyu, there will be a time, shekol ador yiyu chatzufim v'azei panim. The whole generation will be full of chutzpah. V'tishtakach Torah, Torah will be forgotten. V'ein dorish v'ein mevakish, nobody will seek it. V'amis oira liboy b'Torah yiyah nivzeh, and whoever does try to learn Torah will be despised. V'chadal ishim, he'll be just outcast. V'ay ladar hahu, so woe to that generation. Kad yeseh hahu dar, when that generation comes. Amar le, Rabbi Akiva said back to his Rebbe, leis dar hahu miskayim el behevel piyam shel tinoika shel beis rabban. That what will be the schus that generation will exist? They'll exist based on the children learning in Cheder. Kad inun rakichin bilvad, only when they're young. V'kad inun kashishin, but when they grow up, oiraisa mishtakachas minhoin, they'll forget the Torah. Kiha di Omar Rabbi Yehuda, man di Omar elanar ma'dichsiv elanar azeh palalti. What is it that Chana said when she came with Shmuel to the Beis Hamikdash? She said, for this child I davened. So she should have said, For this son I davened. Ela Amra Chana said, Yehi Ratzon Shebeshashi Yigdal, that may it be Hashem's will that when Shmuel grows up, Yishtadel Ba'avoyes HaMakom K'moy Achshav. He should be just as good, just as much of an Oved Hashem as he is now, Shehu Nar, when he's a child. Anyone who's zoichet to be in his old age the same as when he's young, Yizkel Amayla Shmuel Navi. He'll be like Shmuel Navi. Even though when this one that he says the generation will be chutzpahdik and they'll forget the Torah, that's Rebbe Lezer talking, not Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. All the words of the Zohar were said over in the base medrash of Shimon Bar Yochai, and therefore he also can be assumed to agree with them. And these Tanoim, Rabbi Kiva and Rebbe Lezer, are speaking very strong words about the forgetting of the Torah. It doesn't mention anything that's a disagreement here. So it would seem that Reb Shimon agrees that the Torah will be forgotten. Just he interprets that to mean this thing that they won't have halacha brura.
In our generation,
they're not arguing. Even Reb Shimon Bar Yochai also holds that way. Yeah. Okay. So Umasha Amar, and this that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says, Shaloi Tish Takach HaTorah, the Torah won't be forgotten. If he says it will be forgotten, how can he say it won't be? So Hu al derech shekasav Rashi zal b'shir hashirim. This is that going back to that Rashi that Rebbe brought down in siman kuf samach aleph. Rashi says, "Al akasav im loy seidi lach hayafa benashim." If you don't know Klal Yisrael, you don't know how you're going to survive in Galus. Seilach bikvet so and go in the footsteps of the flock. Sheim chad al roya milahanig. Rashi says, if the shepherds stopped watching over you, lahanig oischa, he's takli b'psias derech. So look on the footprints. Shahalchu atzoin, that the sheep went before. Ve'hoakavim nikarim, and the footprints are visible. Hainu. This means to analyze b'darchei avoseinu harishonim, to look at the ways of our fathers. V'im kain, this is the answer to the problem. If you don't know what to do because you don't have halacha brura b'makom echad, you look at the ways of your fathers. V'im kain b'dor she'ein moitzim by halacha brura, a generation where you don't have clear halacha b'makom echad, ein loy el listakel b'darchei rishonim. You have to look at the ways of the rishonim. V'im kacha nasa, if we do that, shaloi lazuz midarchei rishonim. We don't separate. We don't deviate from the ways of the past generations. Lo yiyeh shichas haTorah. Then there won't be forgetting of the Torah. V'hainu the kamar kra. That's what the pasuk says. Ki lo yishachach mipi zaroi. That it won't be forgotten from his descendants. She'im neilech b'derech harishonim. That if we follow the path of the earlier generations, liyo yizaram uvneim leilech b'ikvoseim, we become like their followers. We follow in their footsteps. Then we have a promise that the footsteps will remain recognized. I guess if you step in people's footsteps enough, they become deeper and deeper, and there's a beaten path for you to follow. And then you'll know the derech HaTorah. Okay, so that's really the answer, that when you have all the different opinions, and the Rebbe is among them, and we don't know who to follow, because you never know who's saying it from the influence of the people. But the answer is, if you know that this is the way in previous generations, they viewed it, you look back and you look at the Gedolim from 80 years ago and you see that they were all against Zionism, then you basically know that that's the beaten path. That's what you have to follow. Doesn't matter the Gedolim of the Sephardim or the Litvish or the Hungarian or German. It makes no difference which country they're from, they were all against Zionism. So therefore, Gam b'chlal havtacha, and also the promise that was made. Shelo olam yimsu oid bein zera Yisrael. There will always be some Jews. Sheyasimu leiv likvos harishonim. That's also included in this promise, that there will be some Jews in every generation that will follow the ways of the previous generations. So that's what it means. Ki lo yisi shachach mipi zaroi. It won't be forgotten. Means you'll always have that available to you to look at the previous, and also there will be people who will always be doing that. The whole world won't become Zionist. But if you don't look at the previous generation, you just go and try to find it from your own generation, from the present Poiskim, that you can't find in that generation a clear halacha, then you're going to come to forget the Torah. V'yamar zeh Rav Shimon bar Yochai yan shel Yichoyer lefi pshutin shel dvarim shel Amar Asi the Torah shetistakach miYisrael, that if you just learn Pashup Pshat, the Torah will be forgotten, then mashma chas v'shalom shetistakach legamri. Then it will be mashma that it's just completely gone. Ve'ein shum eitzalach, and then there's no possible way to get out of it, to bring it back again. Therefore he says, no, it's not true. That there won't be a clear halacha. Right? In other words, let's say you would say everybody forgot the Torah today, but in the previous generation they still remembered it. Then who said that people would go back and even look at the previous generation? They wouldn't even have a suffix about it. They'd be totally assimilated. But now that he's saying the halacha is not clear, so you don't know which way to follow, so that's such a question, you can go and look at the previous generation. That's the eitzah. Even the first brisa that says it will be forgotten is the mikra malehu. He agrees to Reb Shimon bar Yochai that it's an explicit pasuk that ki lo yisishach mi pizarai. They just mean that in the present generation there will be forgetting, but in the past there won't be. Both of these things, that the present is forgotten and the past is still remembered, are really explicit in this Rashi that we said before. Hanal b'shir shirim al kasim im loy seidi lach sheyiyad dor shtiyut lo yuchlu leida hanhaga mina manhigim, that the people who are the leaders have stopped leading. He said shechadlu min hanhig, they stopped leading. So it's a generation that they can't learn Torah from the leaders. Aval zeh v'adai sheho akavim nikarim, but the footprints are still visible in Medarchei Rishonim from the words of the previous door. V'yispoinein bahem, and you can look at them and figure out what to do. V'yuchal leida misham hamispoinein in bakisho emes, that whoever seeks truth can look at them and find out what to do. V'chein drashas Rav ala kosev v'hifla Hashem. And now going back to Rav, who is before the Brisa, Rav says that it says v'hifla Hashem es ma'koischa hafla v'fela, that it's going on avda chachmas chachama. What's this makkah that's v'hifla Hashem es ma'koischa? It means that the chachma of the chacham will be forgotten. The koyal avedas chachmas chachamav shehu shtich satoyer. So ein zeh soister l'divrei Reb Shimon bar Yochai. This does not contradict what Reb Shimon bar Yochai says. Why? It means in the present generation it's going to be forgotten. That the Torah will be forgotten in a way that's unfathomable. Like we see today, things that are just unbelievable mistakes that people made. They're against the common sense. All the Tanoim and Rav all agreed to this promise, Shebekra, the Torah won't be forgotten, Kasavti, for like Kasha media. Now it's not shver at all. Why the Gemara doesn't answer what the other Tana will do with this pasuk? Why? Because they're not really arguing at all.